Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. This video, I know it seems like I've been doing a lot of magazines and catalogs lately, but that's just what I've been working on. I am going to try to do a second video today of some makeup. I have another case of makeup, and I thought I would show you what's in my case. This video I will be chewing gum. I do not have my headphones on because I have misophonia and I can't stand the sound of people chewing gum, so I will not be listening to this myself. I normally don't chew gum around people or when I'm talking to people, just because I don't, but I thought I would make a video with some gum chewing because some people have sent me messages and said that they would like that, so that's what this one is about. Today I want to show you the 2015 Fall Outdoor Guide from Wildlife in North Carolina. It's a beautiful picture on the front. I believe this is a quail. I'm pretty sure that's a quail or a grouse. Not sure. Let's see here. Sometimes they'll tell you on the front, but there are a lot of advertisements in here. Let's see. It gives you some information about North Carolina. And here we have a little table of contents for the 2015 Fall Outdoor Guide. This is volume 5, number 2. Number 1. Page 2 is the editor's note. Page 6 has variety abounds at Suggs Mill Pond Game Land. Page 14 has an index to game lands. Page 19 has newly discovered cold water nuisances. Page 20 has North Carolina hunting seasons. Page 22 has the fishing trip of the year. Page 26 has regulations for warm water game fish. Page 30 has regulations for mountain trout. Page 32 is the bear season map. Page 33 is the deer season maps. Page 37 is the North Carolina goose zones. Page 38 is hunting regulations and information. Page 46 is what do deer eat. I grew up in a very rural area, I can tell you. We had apple trees. We had a big apple orchard out there where I grew up. I can tell you for one thing that deer love apples. They were always eating our apples. They like corn too. We had a big garden and they were bad to go out in there and eat our corn. Page 52 is 2014-2015 big game harvests. And page 56 is the Upland Gazette. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, no, okay. On the cover was the northern bobwhite quail. It's the iconic game bird of the South. Habitat improvement is key to bringing the bobwhite back to its historical numbers. And out where I grew up, you would hear bobwhites all the time. But honestly, until just now, I didn't realize they were a type of quail. But I know them when I hear them. They have a very distinctive call. I'm not going to try to imitate it. But if you want to hear a bobwhite, you could look on YouTube and search bobwhite bird call, and you hear what they sound like. And when you hear them, you definitely know them. It's very distinctive. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire thing. We're just going to flip through and find some interesting pages and just read a little bit. I don't have time to make a second video. I don't have long today, but I did have a little time this morning, so I wanted to try to get this in. Okay. Variety abounds at Suggs Mill Pond Game Land. That's quite pretty. It's like a little creek here. I wouldn't really call it a river, but nice creek. Outdoors enthusiasts of all types can find something on this remote game land. Thomas Wolfe said that you can't go home again. But don't tell that to Chelsea Ward. Chesley Ward. He sports a wistful smile as he wheels his Ford pickup out from the depot at Suggs Mill Pond Gameland. He started his career here nearly a decade ago, signing on as a wildlife technician in 2007 for the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. Now he's returned as a management biologist, tasked with the responsibility to take a diverse coastal plain gameland and improve it for both wildlife and humans. He took half a day this summer to show me just what Suggs Mill Pond has to offer. My precious experience. I'm sorry, I got my glasses on, but I'm still farther away from the magazine than I was before. I'm having a little trouble. My previous experience with Suggs Mill came from 2 permit hunts I drew, 1 youth turkey and 1 dove hunt. From hunter to hiker to equestrian to wildlife watcher, this remote gameland offers a lot. Ward, 33, is now the wildlife management biologist for the southern coastal ecoregion. He started his career well after the commission purchased just over 8,000 acres in 1998 from Canal Woods Industries. That company's old airstrip is now 2 dove fields on either side of the depot we departed from one summer morning. This tract of land planted with corn and other crops is actually a waterfowl impoundment. It will be flooded in the fall to provide habitat for migrating waterfowl and hunting opportunities for hunters who draw a permit. And there's another Bobwhite quail. We have some ducks, some mallard, gadwalls, top, and wood ducks. That's a male wood duck. Can be found in the 5 impoundments at Suggs Mill Pond Gameland. Other species include mallards, blue-winged teal, green-winged teal, and bluebills. Suggs Mill Pond Gameland is a CURE, Cooperative Upland Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Program, gameland where the land is managed for early successional habitats that benefit bobwhite quail, on the right, and other game and non-game species. And you will see these signs around a lot in rural areas. Up where I grew up, these signs are everywhere. Similar to this, not exactly the same, but you'll see wildlife gameland signs. And there are rules and requirements that you have to follow to hunt in different areas at different times of the year that you're allowed to do it. Okay. Let's see. CURE. Suggs Mill Pond is one of the CURE Cooperative Upland Habitat Restoration and Enhancement Program gamelands, parts of which are continuously being managed for early successional habitat. CURE is for game and non-game species, said Ward as he eased his pickup down a two-track path. Quail are the poster children for the program. The challenge within a forested landscape like Suggs Mill Pond is that it is forested. Our challenge is to provide early successional habitat within a forested landscape, which means open canopy, stands with a lot of grasses, and forbs in the understory. Selective timbering is one of the tools to fuel that growth. Cutting loblolly pine and planting native longleaf pine is one practice. Another is the liberal use of fire for land management. They do a lot of, the Forest Service does a lot of controlled burns. And you will see signs when they're doing controlled burns, and it helps burn out a lot of the underbrush that will grow. And it actually helps the forest to do controlled burns occasionally. It's the greatest tool as far as habitat improvement and maintenance, Ward said, but as far as the cost, it is the most efficient and effective. It's the best thing we can do for habitat. Like almost all hunting at Suggs Mill Pond, quail hunting is by lottery permit only. Some small game is over-the-counter purchase permits. Lottery hunts ensure less pressure and manageable numbers for the land and game. During my dove hunt last September, I saw several and heard numerous bobwhites around a cut dove field. waterfowl. Further down the road, we pass an old hunting cabin that once housed hunting parties for the previous owners. Now it's office space for commissioned private land biologists. Ward stops to open a gate and pulls through, driving through a gap in a tree line. In the distance is Horseshoe Lake, aka Suggs Mill Pond, which is a Carolina Bay lake. It offers decent fishing to paddlers, no gas motors allowed, and waterfowl hunting in the fall and winter. Its cypress-lined shore looks inviting, and Ward says alligators are not an issue when the winter months hit. A bit on down the trail, we pull into what looks like a partially cultivated lowland. It's the waterfowl impoundment SMP1, one of 5 impoundments at Suggs Mill Pond. In the distance, corn and other crops are growing, and the field is lined with a shallow ditch. PVC pipe markers dot the perimeter. Lots of money and time is put into waterfowl management, said Ward as he scanned the field. We always try to have a full pond of water at least a week ahead of the season to start to attract waterfowl. It does no good for it to be flooded the day before. We have grain sorghum, corn, and Japanese millet, and they are to be left standing when we flood the impoundment for forage. Hunters can bring and drag watercraft into impoundments, but most just don waders. Some utilize standing corn for cover, some line the impoundments in the tree line. Always be mindful of the perimeter ditch. In some places it will float your hat, as Ward says. Flooding is a very gradual process. We'll flood this typically 2 weeks ahead to start attracting waterfowl, and we don't flood it like a bathtub, says Ward. We do a very gradual flood, and what we're trying to do is mimic the natural ecological process of a wetland. The end result is a full pond of water to attract waterfowl. But a more natural process is to flood it very gradually. Ideally, a month ahead of our target date of having a full pond of water, we'll just slowly start letting water in here. The technicians use water control structures. What's unique about Suggs is that everything is gravity-fed from Horseshoe Lake. We have a very unique and elaborate system of control structures to let water in, control structures to stop water and or let water out. Common waterfowl species include blue-winged teal, green-winged teal, mallards, wood ducks, bluebills, and gadwalls. Hunters and birdwatchers can even utilize 2 observation towers that overlook impoundments. And here we have some pictures of some of the various wildlife that you might find. Black bears. Are these black or brown? Yeah, it's black bear. A black bear sanctuary. Honeybees. And here's some of the corn they planted. They definitely try to protect the honeybees because they, as you may know, are becoming more and more scarce. Okay, black bears. Suggs Mill Pond is also a black bear sanctuary, a program that was started in 1971. Initially, close to 800,000 acres of bear habitat was closed to hunting. Suggs Mill Pond was added when it became a game land. The idea behind the bear sanctuary program is to protect the core area of breeding females so that whenever she has offspring and raises offspring, she has that core area that is protected, said Ward as he drives down a logging road. There is no bear hunting, and whenever those young offspring disperse, they disperse into other areas. So pretty much a bear sanctuary serves as a source population to populate other areas, so it protects the core areas from the breeding females. Even though bears are very elusive animals, very often we see trees or light poles that bears scratch or gnaw on. Ward says the Suggs Mill Pond habitat is excellent bear habitat. It's mostly Pocosin, in which bears thrive. Lots of forage like blueberries and gallberries provide excellent food for them. Variety. At one point there were 5 apiaries, honeybee yards on Suggs Mill Pond, all placed by private individuals holding leases. Each year several hives encircled with an electric fence to keep bears at bay. It's a simple partnership. The beekeeper gets honey and the game land gets pollinators. Everywhere you look on Suggs Mill, one can see food plots and habitat manipulation for the benefit of wildlife. Word gives a nod to money from Ducks Unlimited for waterfowl habitat and to the National Wild Turkey Federation for wild turkey habitat enhancement, such as chufa seed for 7 food plots. Ward says that one thing that makes Suggs Mill Pond unique is that the property encompasses 9 different habitat types, with Pocosin being about half of the acreage. As stated earlier, Suggs Mill Pond appeals to many users. The horse set is welcome, but encouraged to stay on established trails and roads, lest a horse step into an old pine stump hole and throw its rider or worse. Signage is plentiful all over the grounds thanks to technician supervisor Bill Johnstone and his crew. A primitive campground is available near the depot, offering cleared sites and a lone porta potty. The campground also sports a new biological data collection station for deer hunters to assist in information gathering. There's a scale, loppers for jaw collection for aging deer, water for rinsing, and a dumpster for waste. Data collected includes sex, age, weight, and other characteristics. Other parts of the property host Tier 2 disabled sportsman blinds that allow easy ingress and egress for deer and turkey hunters. Huntmaster lifts are available to get disabled deer hunters off the ground and looking over food plots on the west side of the property. Part of the mountains of the Sea Trail traverses the game land, attracting hikers. Jessup's Mill Pond at the far end of the game land is a nice-sized body of water ringed with cypress trees that just looks like a bass home. I'd love to go there, go do some fishing. There's just so much to offer, and now Ward is back home to get even more involved in the land. It has my heart. I started my career here, says Ward, looking out over Jessup's Mill Pond. Just in my short career, I've seen drastic changes in the value of the habitat. I look at harvest numbers and I talk to successful hunters, and it's great to talk to a successful hunter who is reaping the benefits of the hard work that's been put in by me and other people with the agency. It's like getting a pat on the back from people. Sometimes it's thankless, and so it's valuable when people acknowledge good work or reap the benefits of the stuff that you know that you've done is great. Whether it's hunters or fishermen, bird watchers, hikers, bikers, horseback riders, whomever it is. It's a very rewarding job because you know that you're doing something that's great for the resource, whether the resource be the vegetation or the animal or the water or the air. And this was written by Mike Zlotnicki. He is the associate editor of Wildlife in North Carolina. And this is a map of Suggs Mill Game Pond land. And it shows you some of the different sections and areas. And here's an expanded view of this section here. This is the insert. And it shows you a close-up view of this section. And here's a map of North Carolina. It shows you in blue the coastal region. Red is the Piedmont region, which is the foothills, and the mountain region to the west. Over in here, the little purple parts, and a national forest. I'm familiar with Uwharrie National Forest, which is right here. Pisgah's a lot bigger. It's over here. And the Croatan is here, and it's big too. And Nantahala, which is this is Croatan. This is at the coast. Nantahala is this. Sorry about that. And this is Pisgah, a big one here. Pisgah's really big. And here, here we have some different places, some ponds and lakes. And you can see what you might be able to find there. And here is a list of the hunting seasons for 2015 to 2016. The deer hunting season is a very popular one in my area. And you know what you're able to use during different times. There's bow hunting, black powder, gun, and urban archery. And if you are caught using a different weapon, and if you are caught without your permit on days when it is not allowed, you can get in trouble for that. And it shows you your daily limits and how many you can get for this season. I've never been hunting. It's just not my thing. Oh, here's something pretty cool. The Fishing Trip of the Year. Written by Frank McSwain and illustrated by Gary Palmer. I bet this is a good story. You know, I love fishing. Well, if you didn't know, you do now. I love fishing. This looks like a trout to me. I've been wrong about a lot of other things today, so it may not be a trout, but it looks like a trout to me. And there are all different kinds of trout. Alright. I'll read this little story. It's not too long. With great anticipation in late summer every year, my family and friends started planning a late October fishing trip to the Outer Banks. We dream of catching many fish and perhaps the elusive big one, but in the end, having a good time and enjoying our time together becomes more important. We usually rent a large beach house big enough for 8 to 10 adult couples, plus rooms for children. We pack up food, clothes, and fishing gear and move in for a week, usually staying in Avon because that gives us easy access to Rodanthe and Hatteras. After settling in at the house, our first task is to obtain bait. We throw cast nets in little roadside inlets or maybe catch some bait fish in the surf or dig sand fleas while fishing. We like taking ramps onto the beach and looking for a darker spot or holes in the waves, indicating the water is deeper there. Bait fish go into those holes and so do bigger fish, looking for food. We've caught bluefish, red drum, speckled trout, and flounder at these places. Sometimes we'll hang on to the occasional striper, but more of those tend to show up as fall progresses into winter. The red drum is clearly our favorite. It's such a hard-fighting, beautiful fish, and it's good to eat. With only one fish allowed per person per day, we practice a lot of catch and release. I've never caught a red drum, but I have been surf fishing a couple times. I did catch a couple of flounder. That was pretty cool. I didn't keep them, though. I don't eat fish. I don't like fish. I just like to catch them. We primarily fish in the surf as opposed to pier fishing. It's convenient, especially if the spot we're fishing is straight out of the back door of the beach house. Most of the time, we use the big open-faced reels and 10 to 14 feet rods. The longer rods add leverage when fighting a big fish and distance to our casts, especially for throwing several ounces of lead. Sometimes we'll try to fish 2 rods per person, but if the fish are biting well, all you can handle is 1. We primarily use a 2-hook bottom rig with a pyramid sinker, sometimes baiting both hooks with the same bait, sometimes with different ones. Frequently the wind is blowing, and with crashing waves, it may take 4 to 8 ounces of lead to hold the bait down. For the beginner, the waves pulling on the line seems like a fish biting, so you set the hook and there's no fish. If a big fish hits, there's no question. All you feel is a hard yank. It helps if you have the drag set correctly. Many times after fishing, salt and sand tend to build up in the reel. And if you don't have this clean, the drag may lock up, causing a break-off when you do hook up with a big fish. You have to be very careful to keep your reels clean and sand-free. You definitely don't want that. When the bigger fish aren't biting, we'll sometimes downsize to 6.5 or 7.5 foot rods and fish for whiting, speckled trout, flounder, and puppy drum. Fresh shrimp is the bait of choice, but the surf can beat up the shrimp easily, so it pays to have a lot on hand. One of the exciting things about fishing is that you never know what you might catch. One day at Hatteras Point, I hadn't caught anything, not even a bluefish. A man beside me hooked into something really large. After an hour of giving line and winding line, he finally dragged in a stingray as big as a truck hood. You could see the excitement on his face while the struggle was going on, followed by the exhaustion of battling such a large ocean creature. Sometimes you hook into something large like that and the line breaks, leaving you to only imagine what it might have been. On nice days, we fish closer to our house so everyone can come out. The children play in the sand, picking up shells and driving miniature dump trucks. Some of the women like to fish too. On one occasion, my daughter's husband, Paul, threw out a line and immediately set the hook. "Here, Tammy," he said, "pull me one in." After a good struggle, she landed the biggest flounder any of us had caught, a good 3 pounds. She was elated with the catch and not shy about letting the rest of us know how big a fish she had caught. Some of the best fishing is at the famous Hatteras Point. Many times anglers are standing shoulder to shoulder in chest waders, wading deep into the waves. We were fighting here on our last afternoon and immediately started catching bluefish. They are aggressive, hard fighters, and are not very particular about what they choose to eat. Because of their sharp teeth, which can slice open a finger if handled incorrectly, we use wire leaders. I think I did catch a bluefish one time, and you do have to be careful because they will bite you. I'm not used to catching fish that can bite me. I prefer freshwater. These saltwater fish are just crazy. Some of us also caught sharks of 2 to 3 feet before we began catching red drum. Grandsons Donovan, 15, and Malachi, 11, were among those in chest waders fishing in the surf. For Malachi, his dad, Paul, or I would throw out his bait as he wasn't big enough to cast it very far. Some of the waves were so tall that we had to hold on to Malachi several times. All of us had caught a keeper drum except Malachi, who wanted one badly. When he hooked something large. He was barely big enough to hold on to the rod, much less attempt to reel in a big fish. Paul told him to start backing up toward the shore. With Paul alongside, Malachi stumbled in the waves and fell, going completely underwater. All we could see was the rod sticking up. Everyone could hear his mother, Tammy, yelling, "Get him, get him!" Paul grabbed him and pulled him up, while Malachi continued to clutch his rod and try to wind in his fish. One of the onlookers yelled, "That little boy fell in the water." People came running to watch and help if needed. The waves knocked down Malachi, and as he struggled to rise, he went underwater again. Paul helped him up again, but he stumbled once more, though this time he managed to keep his feet. Finally, he wound in his trophy, a nice keeper drum measuring 26 inches long. He was very excited, but shivering, dripping from head to toe with his waders full of cold seawater. That didn't seem to bother him as he stood grinning from ear to ear. Onlookers stood around and admired his beautiful fish, saying, "Way to go, young man, way to go," making his day a great one indeed. We took some photos that will preserve his memory of the big one that didn't get away. While changing into dry clothes, Malachi laughed and talked about what had just happened. "Wait until I get home and tell Brother Brumley what happened and how that fish baptized me 2 times. He looked at me and said, "Pawpaw Frank, that fish is going on the wall beside the biggest I've ever caught." I practiced taxidermy as a hobby, and I told him we'd surely do that. Letting Malachi help with mounting the fish would be exciting for him too. My grandchildren keep me busy mounting fish, and they will continue the tradition. I wouldn't want it any other way. And this is from Frank McSwain, who's an avid fisherman from Lincolnton. This is his first appearance in wildlife in North Carolina. And here we have, looks like regulations for warm water game fish. And it continues onto this page. Regulations for mountain trout. 2015 delayed harvest stocking dates. And here we have the 2015-2016 bear season, western deer season, northwestern deer season, central deer season, eastern deer season, and the North Carolina goose zones. We have a lot of Canadian geese here. Kind of annoying sometimes, but you can't do anything about it. Here we have restrictions on hunting bear with dogs and using unprocessed foods. Here they talk about wild turkey and big game harvest reporting, small game and other seasons. Well, I didn't know we had a raccoon and possum season. I'll be darned. Migratory birds, waterfowl. What do North Carolina's deer eat? I'll tell you now, They eat berries, they love apples, and they love corn. I've seen these berries. I don't know what they are. Huh. Beggar lice. Oh, I know beggar lice. That's these things. They stick to your clothes. They're almost like Velcro. And you know if you've walked through a patch of beggar lice, because these things will just stick to you and you just have to pick them off. That deer looks like he's photobombing somebody. I have no idea what these are. Pokeweed? I've seen them, but I don't know what they are. I know my mom always told me not to eat them. 2014-2015 Big Game Harvest. Black Bear Harvest by region. Bovine Balance. Hands-on home place habitat. This looks interesting. Conservation Chronicles. Many people leave the family farm and vow never to return. Watching parents struggle to maintain their childhood home, coupled with a youthful dose of the grass is always greener, has sealed the fate of many tracts of rural land. Today, more than ever, the financial gain of selling a parcel of family property in the Piedmont of North Carolina is difficult to resist. However, all is not lost, for there are folks out there that hold home, heritage, and habitat in high regards. One of these special people is Marie Petit. Marie not only returned to her Guilford County home place, but she has taken steps to manage the property as a wildlife oasis and protect it in perpetuity. Miss Petit's 59-acre tract began taking shape when her parents, George E. and Margie Petit, purchased a parcel of property in 1952. Soon this property began providing for the Petit family and teaching life lessons to those who worked the land. Marie does not use the term subsistence farm, but does recollect Dad raised just about everything we ate. We did not sell much, we just lived off the land. Staple crops of corn, tomatoes, green beans, field peas, and white potatoes were canned, frozen, or stored in the root cellar to feed the family through the winter, or they were traded with neighbors. Sweet potatoes, blueberries, watermelons, and peanuts offered seasonal treats throughout the year. The sustenance raised from the land nourished the family physically and strengthened their spirit and resolve. I always knew I would live on the property and create a wildlife preserve, Marie said. Marie left the farm to pursue a career in the automotive industry, but returned as she promised upon her retirement in 2009. She promptly began evaluating the property, researching management options, and networking with natural resource professionals to develop goals and objectives for the farm. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission's Private Lands Program, as well as the North Carolina Forest Service and the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, provided technical guidance for this project. With input from these agencies, a plan was developed to address the objective of improving general wildlife habitat with an emphasis on small wetland communities, early successional wildlife habitat, non-native plant control, and pollinator enhancement. Using this plan, Marie identified priority practices, submitted an application, and was awarded a contract for cost assistance through the NCRS's Environmental Quality Incentive Program, EQIP. With a solid plan and EQIP contract in place, Marie began making big changes on the farm. She bought a sprayer for her tractor and carefully learned how to calibrate it for safe, effective herbicide application. The hydraulic system on Marie's tractor was updated to allow the use of a no-till seed drill. Armed with the right equipment, a wealth of knowledge, and EQIP cost assistance, she embarked on the process of converting fescue to native vegetation. The first step was killing fescue on 17 acres of old pastures. Once the fescue was killed, a mixture of native grasses, forbs, and wildflowers was planted across the acreage. USDA Farm Bill funding for this project has proven to be a great investment, paying high dividends to many wildlife species. Anyone that knows Marie would agree that she was not sitting around before the fescue conversion project, but the successful planning seemed to shift her into overdrive. Marie has been a spokesperson for native species and wildlife habitat, according to NRCS District Conservationist Gary Cox. She often opens her property to educate others and was instrumental in native planting projects on Guilford County's publicly owned open space properties. Marie has continued to research what to do and uses a methodical process to figure out how to best reach her goals. She is now a licensed pesticide applicator and spends hours scouting her property and treating non-native plant species. She continues to gain knowledge by attending training sessions covering topics such as prescribed burning and pollinator habitat enhancement, but more importantly, she is constantly working on her property. With new knowledge and training, she's continually refining her objectives and working to improve the habitat on the farm. Marie is currently expanding her native grassland acreage by converting a sewer line right-of-way from Cerci Lespedeza and Fescue to a mixture of short native grasses and forbs. The 3-year site preparation process has involved treating non-native Cercia and Fescue each year, then sowing cover crops to protect the soil. Planting the right-of-way should take place during the spring of 2016. With help from the Piedmont Land Conservancy, Marie recently placed a conservation easement on the property. This easement will ensure that the property stays undeveloped while allowing for future forest and habitat management. The early successional habitats on this property is also a wildlife habitat conservation agreement with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. This agreement allowed the property to be enrolled in the Wildlife Conservation Land Program, which results in habitat areas being taxed at the same rate as agriculture cropland, a rate lower than typical properties. In today's fast-paced world, we are surrounded by the lure of instant gratification. Many of us, myself included, succumb to the easy way at times. Isn't it nice to know that there are those who value the home place, are rooted in their heritage, focus on habitat, and have the heart to implement conservation? Marie Petit has chosen to take on the same struggle as her father, working the land. The fruits of her labor are different than her father's, but they should be appreciated and commended by all of us who enjoy the outdoors, value our wildlife resources, and are a little nostalgic for how things used to be. And this is Marie Petit, and this is some of her property. It's pretty with all the flowers. And bird hunting with bird dogs. Private lands program. And the season of rabies. Ooh, rabies is a problem. Okay, we'll read the season of rabies. That's a raccoon and that's a fox. And that's a shot of the rabies virus up close. That's a fat raccoon. As the weather warms and spring shows in its North Carolina beauty, we at the NCWRC start preparing for an influx of calls regarding sightings of many species, both young and old, with the all-too-common assumption of it must have rabies. During the spring, summer, and fall months, concerned members of the public tell us about their close encounters with wildlife and their young. And for some species, they share with us the assumption that the animals must be sick because they were out during the day. And that's true. You don't often see foxes or raccoons out during the day. And it is a bit concerning when you do. Spring and summer are taxing months for many wildlife species, as most mammals will have their young in the spring and face increasing needs for nutrients coupled with increasing time foraging for food. The day has only a certain number of hours, so it is not unusual to see many mammalian species, including foxes and raccoons, looking for food during the day. Females with young may also be scouting the area for signs of predators or suitable denning areas to protect their young. Foxes and raccoons are also predators, and this time of the year, when many other species are having young, represents a good opportunity to find an easy meal. Later in the summer and early in the fall, many young start dispersing and looking for a piece of land to call their own. This behavior also increases the possibility of sighting a wandering young fox, rabbit, or raccoon during your neighborhood walk. But as the saying reminds us, not all who wander are lost, or as we say at the Wildlife Commission, not all who wander are sick. In North Carolina, we have a great diversity of wildlife, and only a few are considered rabies vectors. Although all mammals are susceptible to rabies, rabies vectors are those considered to have a higher risk of becoming carriers for the virus, and thereby be more likely of transmitting it to humans. Our rabies vector species are raccoons, foxes, bobcats, coyotes, bats, and skunks. And when one of these animals bites or otherwise breaks the skin of a person, it is considered rabid until proven otherwise. The pathogen responsible for rabies is a virus which replicates very well in the brain and the salivary glands and infects new individuals when the host animal bites or scratches a new host. The virus cannot penetrate healthy, unbroken skin, so the blood or saliva of an infected animal needs to come into contact with an open wound on the uninfected individual. Once inside the new host, the virus travels through the nerves toward the brain and glands, a process that can take days to years in humans. The process is much faster in animals, with most animals infected with rabies presenting symptoms and dying within 14 days of infection. Therefore, 14 days is the common quarantine requirement for most pets. Once the symptoms appear, the disease is fatal and has no cure. This disease kills over 55,000 people a year around the globe, but only 1 or 2 deaths occur yearly in the United States. As your veterinarian may have told you, there is a rabies vaccine for pets. We even have a very specific oral rabies vaccine for wild raccoons and a vaccine for people that are at high risk, including wildlife biologists and veterinarians. It is extremely important to vaccinate your pets against rabies because in many cases, humans become exposed to rabies when tending to a pet that has a fight with a wildlife species. If your pet is vaccinated, he is protected, and he is protecting you. If he is not, then you are at risk, and your pet will have to go through expensive quarantine procedures that can be very stressful for the animal and the owner. Once a person is exposed to rabies, there are 2 choices. If the wildlife or domestic animal responsible for the exposure is available, the animal will be tested for rabies. The tissue needed for rabies testing is the brain, so the animal has to be euthanized. If the animal is a pet, vaccination records and ownership will determine the path taken. In the worst case scenario, the pet will be euthanized and tested, and in the best case scenario, its vaccination may be boosted and the animal may return home with its owner. If the animal tested is negative, then the person exposed is cleared, but if the animal is positive, then the person exposed will have to get post-exposure prophylaxis. Post-exposure prophylaxis is an expensive series of vaccines given at specific intervals. Currently, these are given in the muscle, not in the belly like in years past, and are comparable pain-wise to any other vaccination you may have received. In some cases, the offending animal is not available because sometimes they escape or they die and are discarded before being tested. When this happens, the exposed person will get the post-exposure prophylaxis as a preventative measure. In North Carolina, the Public Health Laboratory tested 4,380 samples for rabies in 2014, and 2,282, about 52%, of those were from wildlife species. The bulk of the wildlife testing was from bats, 1,539 animals, and only 2% of the bats tested were positive for rabies. The other 743 wildlife species tested included bobcats, foxes, raccoons, skunks, and possums, amongst others. I know it says opossums, but here we call them possums. Ugly little things. Ornery, too. Most of the positive rabies results came from foxes, raccoons, and skunks. This is to be expected as these species are rabies vector species. Approximately 40% of tested raccoons and foxes and over 70% of tested skunks were positive for rabies. In total, only 14% of the wildlife specimens tested were positive for rabies, leading us to reinforce the idea that not all animals that wander are sick. Keep in mind that this lab only tests animals that have been part of a human exposure case, either by directly attacking a human or attacking a pet. Bats are the only exception, as bats get tested when encountered inside the living quarters of people, regardless of known contact. To reduce your risk of becoming infected with rabies, be aware of the normal behavior of wildlife. Do not approach wildlife even when they look healthy, and do not collect young of any mammal species. Many well-intentioned individuals try to help foxes and raccoons that seem abandoned by feeding them and bringing them into their homes. In most cases, the young are not abandoned, but the mother had left them just long enough to be able to hunt for dinner. She will be back as soon as you leave the area. If the person finding the animal moves them or stays close to keep an eye on them, the mother cannot come back. Once the person has taken a rabies vector species into their home and has fed them, the person is considered exposed to rabies. That young animal will have to be euthanized and tested. All of the good intentions turn into a death sentence to the young animal. If you find an animal that is acting strange, walking in circles, attacking animals or things, chewing on rocks, or one that is just extremely depressed and unresponsive, call animal control or your local wildlife biologist immediately. We are here to help, but if you are one of the lucky individuals that sees a wandering fox or a curious raccoon crossing your yard, consider yourself fortunate to live in a state where this is a common occurrence. Maybe even snap a picture, but do not approach them because your health and that of your family and pets could be at risk. And that is the last little article in the 2015 Fall Outdoor Guide from Wildlife in North Carolina. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for stopping by.